Our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Brian Scarborough. Hey, Jim, what are your thoughts on Bryan Adams, a.k.a. Crush? He seemed to have the size and strength that Vince loves, but I noticed he was repackaged with several gimmicks in the WWF. Was he booked wrong, or did he have true potential?
Well, both. Bryan Adams was a nice guy. I worked with him for about a year and a half there in the mid-90s in WWF. He was a nice guy. Yeah, he was a good worker for a guy that size. There was nothing wrong with it. I don't think he was, the biggest superstar in wrestling waiting to get out, undiscovered or whatever. I think they gave him some goofy gimmicks because at one point he legitimately lived in Hawaii, so he became Kona Crush, and he's like he looked as Hawaiian as I do. He just lived there. If I lived in fucking Hawaii, I still wouldn't look Hawaiian, right? And then he was in the he was good friends with Taker, and he was in the DOA. But they tried a number of different things with him. I think they should have settled on one thing, and maybe if that didn't work, let him go for a while and do something else somewhere else and come back. And they just kind of hit 2 or 3 different things there within the space of a couple of years. And it just, and then was it then toward the late 90s? Didn't he have a legal issue of some description? Put him at least on the do not call list for a little while. Brian, do you remember anything about that?
I don't remember that. He could have, but I just don't know. But he had a tag team with Brian Clark. What was the name?
Yeah,
Chronic.
Chronic, yes. In WCW. And that didn't help either, because that was rotten. And I think the legal issues that he had back in Hawaii may have been due to something related to Chronic also. I'm not sure. I'm regret that I said that, because that may have been something I learned in my talent relations hat, and I shouldn't. But there were a few issues during that period of time. But I didn't have anything against him. Thought he was a nice guy. Did not. As a matter of fact, him and Brian Lee, come to think of it, were the ones that helped me out in when they broke my back windshield in that brawl in Atlantic City. I was going to ram the cars because they had parked all the cars in the parking garage around mine, so I couldn't leave either. And I was going to ram one. And Brian and Brian Lee came through and picked the rear bumper up of a car and moved it over for me so I could pull out.
Oh, wow.
It was just a small car. But anyway, I think, just bad gimmicks and bad booking was some of it. And I don't know. At the time in the 90s there was a lot of big, strong guys that kind of were shaped like and kind of offered the physical attributes that Brian offered. And, he might have got lost in the crowd some too there. Now he'd be Andre the Giant, wouldn't he?
I think the best stuff he ever did in his career, or at least on a mainstream level outside of Portland, was his feud with Randy Savage in 94.
I remember some of that, but then didn't they do something kind of goofy as a blow-off?
Well, no, they had the match at WrestleMania. It was a Falls Count Anywhere in the building.
That's right, where they ended up fucking hog-tying him and dragging him out. He looked like he'd stepped in the rope trap in the cartoons and the Looney Tunes backstage.
I don't know if I ever told you this story. I've told it on 605. But a guy who rented office space from my family had a company called Star Trek, and they did these 3D photos where they would take a photo and kind of pull the main image out so it looked like it was popping out. And WWE became a client of his, and he did these 3D photos of The Undertaker and Bret Hart and Randy Savage. So because of that, he had a table at the first Fan Fest that they did for WrestleMania 10 in 1994. And because he rented space for my family, and he knew I loved wrestling, I got to be at that table and really just walk around when the public wasn't there, which was awesome. I mean, it was just the greatest time. hung out a lot with Hillbilly Jim, and he gave me like all these Coliseum videos. It was great.
Oh yeah, Jim's great.
So I'm there. I think it was at least Saturday and Sunday. I don't know if it was Friday too. I don't remember off the top of my head. I have the pass over here somewhere. And on Sunday, as the fan fest is starting to close down and everyone's gone and people are starting to dismantle their booths, we're getting ready because we've got 4th row tickets for WrestleMania. So we're kind of just going to walk from there into the main building because it's right behind the arena. And various wrestlers are there and they're all awesome. Bam Bam Bigelow, the Head Shrinkers. Talked to Bam Bam Bigelow about the Giants because I had a Giant starter jacket back then. And we decided before we go into the arena, me and the guy's name was Mark and his brother-in-law, we all had to go to the bathroom. Now, I was only 14. They're all adults. We go into the bathroom, and in the bathroom...
Wait a minute. You mean you're only 14, where they're all... You're scared to go in the bathroom by yourself?
Well, no, the point is just to lay out the scenario of what was going on. It's me and 2 adults. And we go into the bathroom, and in the bathroom is Pat Patterson, Randy Savage, and Crush going over the finish of the match, because that's where the match ended, was that bathroom.
That's right.
And when we walk in there, Randy Savage turns around and goes, "You got to get the fuck out of here." And Mark Cooperman kind of puts his hand over his dick and he says, "Macho Man, we got to piss." And Randy says, "I don't care what you got to do. You got to go." And we left. And then, when he came out, we're all yelling at him during the match. And I go home and I watch the video and the match ends in the bathroom we were in, where they were. And you can't even really tell it was a bathroom. But that's where we were before WrestleMania happened. We were in there and we got kicked out by mostly Randy Savage. Crush and Pat Patterson were just kind of standing there not saying anything, but Randy did all the talking.
You never know who you're going to meet in the bathroom.
No. At Madison Square Garden.
Or anywhere for that matter. Did I ever tell you a story when Chris Candido ran into Lou Thesz?
Yes, I remember that story, yeah.
Well, then I won't tell it now.
Well, tell the audience. You have to tell the audience. You have to tell the audience.
No, you said you've heard it.
I've heard it.
Last thing I want to do is bore you.
We have hundreds of thousands of new listeners. Tell them the story.
All right. So fucking Chris Candido in 1994, after Paul Lee had screwed Dennis and the NWA on the NWA title tournament, they had another one, and they put the belt on Chris Candido so that they could get somebody that they could trust holding the belt, and then he held it until they put it on Dan Severn when they made the deal with Dan. So at that point, Chris is still in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, but I gave him some days off to fly to do some other commitments, some other matches, whatever, for the NWA, right? So he gets back to Knoxville one weekend, and he can't wait to tell me this. He's been in the airport, and he goes in the bathroom, and he's standing in front of the urinal taking a piss, and he looks over, and like 2 urinals over to his right is Lou Thesz. Lou's just flying back home, probably to Norfolk. I think he lived in Norfolk at the time, over in Virginia on the beach out there. So, of course, Lou does not know Chris, but Chris knows Lou. So he goes up and introduces himself. I assume after they finished, all the business they were doing, Mr. Thesz, and he's telling me his stories. Mr. Thesz, it's so nice to meet you, sir. I'm one of the boys. I work, and right now I'm the NWA champion. He's trying to figure some way to tell Lou Thesz that he actually is, instead of some fucking goof, right? He's somebody. But can you imagine in 1994 somebody telling Lou Thesz they're the NWA champion in an airport bathroom? And Lou, of course, is gentlemanly and friendly. So, are they doing well? Well, yeah, we're trying. Well, good. Anyway, the upshot of it was that Lou had to go catch his plane. But the one piece of advice that he gave Chris Candido as NWA champion, he said, "Now, just remember, young man, when you're flying around the country making all these shots, watch out. Somebody's going to try to double cross you." In 1994, right? But then Chris, he didn't bother to explain that the reason why that he was the champion was because somebody double crossed the last fucking. And so, but anyway, nevertheless,
I once ran into Abdullah the Butcher in the airport.
How much did he charge you?
No, you know what? We were coming back from Fan Week in 95, and the flight was from Knoxville to Atlanta and then get on another plane, Atlanta to JFK. And on both planes with me is Marty Gorman. So me and Marty are in the Atlanta airport waiting for our next flight. And who do I see in a white suit with a cigar in his mouth but Abdullah the Butcher in the airport in Atlanta, of course. I had just been hanging out with Masa Hori during Fan Week, and I knew Masa was tight with Abdullah. So I figured I got an in. I'm not a name dropper. This is like one of the few times I dropped a name. I went up to him. I said, "Excuse me, Abdullah, I'm friends with Masa." And right away, that was all I had to say. "Oh, I love Masa. How is he? Tell him I'm going to see him soon." You know, I'm not going to see Masa again for a while. But I got him to sign a Japanese magazine I had that Masa gave me. And while I was talking to him, Marty was scared that it was Abdullah the Butcher, and he was kind of hiding. And then there were two women behind Abdullah who just kept mouthing to me, "Who is he? Who is he?" Because they knew he was someone famous now because I was talking to him and kind of...
Are you sure they weren't saying, "What is he? What is he?"
But yeah, Abdullah the Butcher coming back from Fan Week in 95 in the Atlanta airport.
Well, and that would have been August, right?
August 95, yeah.
September, October, November. That was right about the time that I fucking called him up and booked him for Thanksgiving weekend that year, I believe, when he ended up no-showing because he got a last-minute tour of Japan and fucking called me and said, "I can't make it." I said, "What, next week?" He was supposed to be the hitman, the mystery man. No, it was 94, I think. No, it was 95. The mystery hitman that was coming after Bullet Bob.
And by the way, he was working for Giant Baba, All Japan Pro Wrestling. They didn't have any last-minute tours. Where
Yeah. Well, that's why I said it just came up. Uh-huh.